Hello and welcome to a Geek First Sidequest bonus episode. I'm your host, the Adam Caster Dilemas, and something a little different this week as we were supposed to do our regular Monday night recording, Tuesday morning drop of Sidequest, but the co-host that I had in mind was not feeling too well. So instead, we're going to shake things up a bit this week. And I was planning on doing this later in the week, but instead we're going to do it now, which is a Marvel Snap focused episode with just me here. And then the regular side quest episode is going to come out a little bit later this week. I'm thinking Thursday. I'm thinking Friday. Who knows exactly what day? Just kind of wait and see how things go. But yeah, with that being said, let's just get right into it. So I wanted to do this episode for a few weeks now, and I thought it was a good time to do it now that the new season for Marvel Snap has just rolled over. But I talked about Marvel Snap when it came out on the podcast, and I've talked about it a couple times since, but not a lot considering that I've pretty much been playing it nonstop since it came out in, I think, whatever it was, late October. I got, how many months is that? However many months is I got, like, I think three out of 4 of the battle passes, season passes, whatever they call it. And I've been playing a ton of the game. But I think this is kind of a good time for me to do it. This is a bit of a parting gift because I've decided that I'm going to be stepping back from the game a little bit for a few reasons. One, I mean, just the month of February is crazy. There's lots of things going on, tons of games I'm going to be playing, so I kind of want to step away from it there. And, you know, with a very Battle Pass focused game that this is, you're really incentivized. I mean, this is what they want from you. They want you to spend all your time playing this thing. And it feels like if you can't dedicate a ton of time and make sure you get through the 50 levels of a battle pass and all this stuff, it almost doesn't feel worth it to play at all, which is kind of a weird thing that instead I'm playing for these challenges rather than playing for the joy of the game. But that's just kind of the way the thing is shaken out. But I probably won't be playing much in February anyway, so I decided that, you know, I'm just going to spend a few weeks away from it. Some other reasons, too, is I just feel like the level I'm at, which is, let's see, I'm at 1,800, so I'm pretty high up there. And I feel like at this point, the progression is so slow. And my favorite part about playing Marvel Snap is building decks and getting creative and making cool things, which is what this episode is going to be focused on, right? Is showing off some of my favorite decks. But just with where I'm at, it takes so long to get enough new cards to really have different strategies that you can really use, and how slowly they kind of trickle down the different series of cards. So I think with that too, I'm just losing a bit of interest in the game. I feel like I'm kind of going through the motions rather than really enjoying it or having very intriguing matches. And I think, yeah, I definitely plan on coming back later. Either maybe there's just a really good season pass month that I want to check out for a certain character or card, or I think just when they add more modes, like an arena mode that they have in Hearthstone, I would love if they had some sort of draft pick thing that they did here, and hopefully that would have some more rewards that give you more cards so you can unlock things a bit quicker, or even like a campaign mode, or even just like different uses of the locations. Maybe there's more locations or less and games are longer, just ways to make you engage with the game in different ways. So when they've done more of that stuff, I'll definitely come back to me playing the game some more. But yeah, let's do this. This is my quote unquote parting gift for the game, even though I'm not done for good. I'm going to go through some of my favorite decks, and I have a couple decks as well from the Geekverse community that I got from the Geekverse Discord. So make sure you join that, because then you could have pitched me your favorite deck, and I could have included it in the episode here. So I'm going to share my screen here for the YouTube viewers here, so you can see a visual of this, but I'll read off the cards as well. Let's start off with a couple kind of basic decks that I've had these ones pretty much forever. A lot of these are cards that you'll find very early on in the game, and even if you don't have 100% of this, you can still get a general version of this deck that you could use even if you're at very low level. So this is just called my ongoing deck. The general strategy here is that just playing a bunch of different cards that have the ongoing affect them, and then Spectrum is hopefully you're going to get that draw at some point and play that as your 6-cost card and boost all those cards up at the same time. So there's, of course, a ton of different ongoing cards, and these are the ones that I've picked that seem to work out the best for me. So we got Ant-Man, Uatu, the Watcher, we got Ebony Maw, Mojo, Colossus, Lizard, Mr. Fantastic, Punisher, Captain America, Namor, Blue Marvel, and then of course Spectrum in that 6th slot. So generally the strategy here is like there's some nice synergy between Ant-Man and Mojo when you're stacking all your cards on the same spot, and then you can also try and keep Lizard away from those kinds of tiles. And then I usually try and put Namor just on his own tile, leave him on his own. And then with the Blue Marvel buff, with the Spectrum buff, sometimes he can just win a lane on his own. It's really good for getting those challenges when you need to win a location with one card. And then, yeah, other than that, like, Captain America has good synergies with those. And it's really just about stacking these cards and getting as many of them out as possible so that buff from Blue Marvel and Spectrum is as effective as it possibly can be. So even looking at this deck now, like, I think, I don't know, at least 80% of these cards you can get very early on in the game, so you can make a version of this deck pretty simply. And I mean, the strategy of it is quite simple. I don't think there's much I need to break down for it. Next up, I'm going to go through I call it the Quantumania deck for whatever I think because it's a bunch of 1-cost cards, so it's supposed to be a bunch of little characters, but essentially here's the deck. It's the Hood, Ant-Man, Elektra, Squirrel Girl, Agent 13, Nightcrawler, Angela, Wolfsbane, Debris, Khazar, Blue Marvel, and Ultron. So a lot of people, you'll see variations of this deck. It's a pretty common one as well to be seen out there when you're playing your matches. And the general strategy here is get a bunch of 1-cost cards down, and then between Khazar and Blue Marvel, you're going to be buffing those cards a lot. And yeah, it's really, pretty much every match of these, you'll have your 3 locations with all 4 cards, unless there's like a lot of destruction going on or whatever it may be. So obviously the big counter to this deck is Killmonger, which is a pretty popular card, but that's why you have Ultron in there as kind of a bit of a mulligan where whatever Killmonger's played, yeah, he might take out an Ant-Man or a Nightcrawler, a stronger card, but then Ultron can at least replenish those locations, and then Khazar and Blue Marvel will buff them again and you'll be okay. And then, yeah, I really like the combination of Angela and Wolfsbane here because you're just going to have so many low-cost cards that you can easily get the full locations to charge up Angela fully and have a full location for Wolfsbane to drop down and do a bunch of damage. So once again, this deck is made up of like 90% cards that you'll get very early on. So it's a good one to use for that. And I think with that, I'll bring in the first deck from community here. So S-Bub sent me a couple decks, and this one is called the Oneer, and the cards here are Ant-Man, Nightcrawler, Rocket Raccoon, Ebony Maw, Adam Warlock, Armor, Killmonger, Shang-Chi, Khazar, Blue Marvel, Onslaught, and Ultron. So the way he describes this is the ideal play would be to be put Ant-Man, Armor, Ebony Maw, and Adam Warlock on one location. So obviously you have to get the order of that correctly. I guess Ebony Maw would be the 4th one you put down, obviously. And then that lets Adam Warlock draw a bunch of cards until you can ideally get those last 4. So Khazar, Blue Marvel, Onslaught, Ultron. You kind of, I guess you'd want all 4 of those. Or I mean, you'd have 2 6-costs there. So at least 3 out of the 4 of those. And Adam Warlock helps you get all those in your hand so you have the options. Nightcrawler and Ant-Man, Nightcrawler and Rocket can sub for Ant-Man. And then Onslaught can boost all the cards if you don't get Ultron. And then he said Killmonger and Shang-Chi are kind of just backup cards in this, so they don't really necessarily have a synergy. And in fact, it could be kind of dangerous Killmonger if you don't have your armor down defending your Ant-Man or your Ebony Maw. That could be kind of risky. So I think you could swap those 2 cards out, and that's kind of a similar strategy to the deck that I just shouted out. Moving on, I have a movement deck. I don't think there's anything particularly unique about it. And it's kind of even outdated. I think I have more movement cards now. I don't really use this deck unless I get that weekly challenge to do so many moves. So I won't shout that one out just because it's pretty much a standard deck. The Death Dealer deck as well. This is a very standard deck. I'll shout it out just because it's super strong, but I don't think there's anything particularly unique about this. I'm not the only person who's put this collection of cards together, but I have the Hood, Deadpool, Nova, Angel, Bucky Barnes, Carnage, Wolverine, Venom, Killmonger, Sabretooth, Deathlock, and Death. It's just incredibly strong. The combinations of ripping cards apart and then Venom eating them all up, easily getting Death down to the cost of like 1 to 2 in many games. This is just a very, very strong, consistent deck that pretty much always works, especially that they've buffed Wolverine recently, so this deck got even a bit stronger because of that too. So that's a classic right there. Okay, this is one of my personal favorites here, is The Problem, is what I call this one. This consists of Iceman, Korg, Yondu, Daredevil, Hazmat, Scorpion, Green Goblin, Killmonger, Shang-Chi, Rockslide, Hobgoblin, and Spider-Woman. So you'll notice the theme of that is just be as annoying as you possibly can, with just the most savage, annoying ass cards. If you have a challenge that you need to have an opponent retreat, this is a go-to deck for that. People, you go 2 to 3 turns in, and they are just so salty that they'll quit out. So obviously, pretty much all the cards here just throw some sort of debuff on your opponent in some way. You do got to get the timing right here, where you want to make sure that you're playing something like a Yondu before, and even Iceman before Korg, right? Because you don't want Yondu to be hitting the rock. You want the rocks to come in and just be filling up the deck, and the main cards that they have just be useless. But the combination of Korg and Rockslide is great. Just fill up the enemy's cards with useless crap. Hazmat, of course, is a classic here. Even if you deal damage to yourself, that's okay. I think one thing that will often happen in this deck is you'll play Iceman, Korg, Yondu, and you might even play Killmonger later in the game, kill off 3 of your cards, but it doesn't really matter because the damage has been done at that point, and you'll take the trade. So Hazmat, even if you're reducing the damage of your own cards, that's okay. And what else to say about this? I also like the combination of Hazmat and either Green Goblin or Hobgoblin, right? Because you're throwing a card onto the opponent's side and you can reduce that damage even more. That's a really fun combo. And I really like Daredevil here because that turn 5 is so crucial here where, as I said, you have both Hobgoblin and Spider-Woman in this deck. So it's really great to have the information of exactly what your opponent is doing on that turn 5. Once that if you don't play Hobgoblin, your opponent doesn't fill up their side of the location so that it just stays on your side and you get screwed over. But even, if they're going to play to fill up a location, you could just potentially play Spider-Woman in that situation and reduce a bunch of damage. Or you could use it to line up a Shang-Chi attack. Whatever it is, it's just really, really strong. A lot of synergies in this deck. And you can make a simple version of this as well pretty early on, but I think it really gets amped up when you have a Hazmat, when you have a Rockslide, when you have Green Goblin and Hobgoblin in there. That's when this deck becomes just sinister in how strong it is. Next up, I call this deck Jurassic Card. This is pretty much my Devil Dinosaur deck, which is like Moon Girl, Devil Dinosaur. Get as many cards as you can. Ideally with Moon Girl, you're duplicating Devil Dinosaur, getting 2 of them down. I'm not going to shout out my version because it's pretty basic, but I'll shout out 2 community decks here who have a similar, a kind of a riff on this deck, and I think they're both interesting and more unique than the version I have. So another one from S-Bubs here is what he calls the Pick Card. He's got Agent 13, Mantis, Quinjet, the Collector, Cable, Sentinel, Cosmo, Agent Coulson, Moon Girl, Devil Dinosaur, Nick Fury, and the Leader. I don't know if the Leader, his has been nerfed recently, so I don't know if S-Bubs intends to still keep him in there or if he wants to update it with a card that isn't. I don't know, I just think he's such a weaker version now than he was, but to be fair, I haven't used him a whole lot. But the synergy here makes a lot of sense, right? You're putting as many cards in your hand as possible. Ideally, you can Moon Girl to get 2 Devil Dinosaurs, put both of them down, and they'll have like 15 to 17 power, something like that. So this deck seems really strong. I haven't used this. I actually don't have Agent Coulson unlocked, so I wouldn't be able to use this exact deck, but the version I have of it is also very strong. And then from Fanboy Clay, he has the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. deck here, which is Agent 13, the Quinjet, Collector, Armor, Maria Hill, Mystique, Agent Coulson, Moon Girl, White Queen, Devil Dinosaur, Nick Fury, and America Chavez. So very similar here. I'd be curious to know why he has both Nick Fury and America Chavez here. I guess it's just, I mean, you want to be playing your Devil Dinosaur. So yeah, I'm quite curious about the strategy there, but I'd like the combination of Maria Hill, Agent Coulson, and Nick Fury. Obviously, they all have similar abilities that give you very specific cost cards. So I like having all 3 of those. Once again, I don't have Agent Coulson or Maria Hill, so I can't actually make a replica of this deck, but they've both had great success with this one, so you can check out those versions. And next up, we'll go with I call this the Mango Mind Read. Mango, and it's a shout out to Mango, the Melee player, who's known as just always having great reads. But this deck is very fun. It's pretty much the Guardians of the Galaxy with a little Odin action in there. So you got Elektra, Hawkeye, Rocket Raccoon, Forge, Daredevil, Okoye, Star-Lord, Nakia, Groot, Hulkbuster, Gamora, and Odin. So the idea here is you're really trying to get as many snipes on your opponent as you can, as in terms of predicting where they're going to play cards to get the bonuses off all the Guardians cards. And then just even without that, like Okoye and Nakia, just even boosting the damage on those cards anyway, this deck can just get insane damage output. Once again, you have the Daredevil combination, where Daredevil and Gamora is a great duo. Daredevil will sight the map on turn 5, and then Gamora you can place her exactly where you need to. And then Odin is a great turn 6 play here because he'll just allow you to get another proc on that those Guardians abilities or on Elektra, whatever it may be. So that's a really strong combination there. This deck's very fun, but it's also very high risk, high reward, right? If you're not getting the correct reads or your opponent is playing a strange deck, then it might not have a ton of success, but it's a fun one nonetheless. Next up, let's go with this is a weird one. This is called the Magic Limbo deck, and to be honest, this one is not very good, but this one is a lot of fun. I've had a good time with this one. I feel like you really mess with your opponent, but like I said, it's not the strongest, but the cards here are Sunspot, Nightcrawler, the Watcher, Psylocke Armor, Scarlet Witch Storm, Rhino, Jubilee, Jessica Jones, Magic, and the Infinaut. So obviously you have Uatu, who can scout the map, and then you have Scarlet Witch, Storm, Rhino, and Magic, who all change locations, right? So that can be a really fun combination where you could do something like play Storm. She'll put her ability down the next turn as the last turn you can play cards here. But then you can come in with Scarlet Witch or Rhino and change that to something else. So someone might dump some cards in there that aren't necessarily the strongest, but they just want to fill the location up so they don't have nothing there. But then you can hit them with a Rhino, and then you'll just have more turns to play stronger cards there. Or one thing I really like doing is playing Magic on turn 5 and then hoping your opponent is saving like for a big play on turn 7, but then on turn 6 just hit that Limbo with Scarlet Witch, Rhino, Storm, whoever it is, and you can just cancel out that turn 7. It doesn't still go to turn 7, so that's a really fun combination as well. And then the backup idea here is maybe like if none of that tomfoolery is actually working, winning you the game, that hopefully a combination of Jessica Jones, Sunspot, and Infinaut. If you just don't play anything on turn 5, right? Jessica Jones, that works well. Sunspot gives him a bunch more damage, and then the Infinaut you can drop on turn 6, and maybe that's all you need in one location to get a success. So yeah, definitely check that one out if you want a good time, but not a long time. And next up, let's go for this. So this is my Polarity deck, and I admit this needs maybe a couple reworks, but I have had a lot of success with it. This is based around Mr. Negative being the kind of, you could call him the leader of the group in this one, but we got the Hood, Adam Warlock, Angela, Psylocke, Okoye, Ironheart, Morph, Mr. Negative, Jubilee, Iron Man, White Tiger, and Professor X. So the tactic here is ideally on turn 2, you can play Psylocke, so that on turn 3 you can play Mr. Negative, and then from that point on, all the cards in the deck will have at most a 2 cost, but most of them have 0, so that you can just play a ton of cards for the rest of the game, and it can make some really fun combinations. It can be a bit high risk, high reward once again, where if you don't get the Mr. Negative draw, this deck is pretty much useless because a lot of these cards don't have a lot of damage on their own. So once again, a pretty risky one, but can be very fun if it works out. And then I'll bring in another deck from Fanboy Clay here. He has the Positively Negative deck, which is similar kind of style here, but definitely some core changes. This one's got Sunspot, Angela, Psylocke, Ironheart, Mystique, Wolfsbane, Mr. Negative, Wong, Iron Man, White Tiger, Magic, and Sarah. So yeah, maybe about half the cards are the same here, with Mr. Negative being what you're looking for here. And yeah, I guess the Mr. Negative, Wong, and White Tiger combo. Obviously, Wong and White Tiger are peanut butter and jelly. They are an incredibly strong combo. And then Magic and Sarah will help give you, just allow you to purchase more cards and give you more turns to play those cards. So haven't tried that one either, even though I do have all those cards. So I should definitely give that one a go because that seems pretty powerful. I want to save that one for the end because that's a fun one. Let's see. I have a Savage Lands deck. I don't think there's anything special. This is just Zabu and a bunch of 4-cost cards. So I won't shout that one out because you've seen that deck a million times. Cosmic Realm as well. This is my Silver Surfer deck. I'll show this one out. It's pretty strong, but I don't think it's particularly unique. But we got Elektra, Rocket Raccoon, Psylocke, Mysterio, Ironheart, Silver Surfer, Bishop, Wolfsbane, Mr. Fantastic, Captain America, Wong, and Odin. So obviously the ideal strategy here is you can play Wong, and then you can play Silver Surfer to get that location to pop twice, or that ability to pop twice, and then ideally Odin can hit it again at the end to get that again and just boost all your 3-cost cards. And you have a bunch of those. You have Ironheart, Bishop, Wolfsbane, Mr. Fantastic, and Captain America. So that's a lot of cards that you can potentially boost up. So yeah, it's very, very strong. And let's go into the Wonger's deck here. So this one, once again, the core strategy here is something you've seen before, but I think it's worth shouting out because it's still a very strong deck. And this one I have Quicksilver, Psylocke, Okoye, Ironheart, Mystique, Wolfsbane, Wong, Absorbing Man, White Tiger, Black Panther, Spider-Woman, and Odin. So once again, similar idea. You want to play Wong and you want to play White Tiger. And then Odin to duplicate those effects. Or of course, if you can do Wong and then Mystique to duplicate that and then get another card, Absorbing Man can kind of play into that too, or you can get a second effect. So just a really strong deck, really consistent one. And yeah, also since Psylocke's in here, that can work in 2 ways. One, if you have, let's say you get Psylocke later in the match and you already have a Wong down, you can play that and you'll get twice as much energy. But if you don't and you get Psylocke early and you can play her on turn 2, then that can help you get Wong on turn 3 so that you can start those combos off nice and early. So obviously some great synergies there, things that work. And then at the worst case scenario, like you got Black Panther, you got Spider-Man, Wolfsbane, like you just have strong cards that have a lot of power on their own. So even if things don't fully connect, you'll be able to have a fighting chance no matter what the situation. And let's see. We're getting down to it here. We got 2 more decks for me to shout out. So I'll start with I call this the Patrician. Once again, a strategy you've seen before, but I'll shout out my version of it, which has Wasp, Squirrel Girl, Misty Knight, Mr. Sinister, Shocker, Mysterio, Mystique, Patriot, Cyclops, The Thing, Abomination, Onslaught. So obviously the key strategy here is to get Patriot down, and if you can get Patriot and Mystique down in that order, so you can duplicate that effect, and then Onslaught even on top of that, essentially you're going to make it so all your cards that don't have abilities are going to get just huge buffs on top of them. And every card here, every other card will have no ability to it, or it's like a Mr. Sinister where it creates a duplicate that has no ability. Squirrel Girl and Mysterio both create 2 versions, which I really like. That's very, very strong. You got to be a bit careful sometimes if you only have so many locations to put these cards on. Wasp is also in there, a really nice one because that's a 0 cost and gets potentially huge buffs. I always just leave that in my hand and play it on the last turn. Because once again, I don't want to take my other slots. It's kind of a last case scenario, but it's a nice one to have in there. And I think, for me, like when I see this deck played, or similar versions of it, I very rarely see The Thing, and even less rarely see Abomination as being the cards in there. And I get it to an extent. If you can play more cards that have less cost, you can essentially get that bonus multiple times in theory, right? But at the same time, if you don't get all the synergies down, let's say you only get Patriot, or you don't get Patriot at all, having Abomination as just a 9 power is really, really great. So that's why I like it as a bit of a saving face. If things don't go to plan, you can still put together a pretty decent attempt to win the match. And then I think the last one here I'll show you is the Portals deck, is what I call this. So this is similar to a Devil Dinosaur deck, but it's got some key differences, and this one's really fun and also very, very strong. This deck has Agent 13, Mantis, Quinjet, Psylocke, the Collector, Cable, Sentinel, Mystique, Moongirl, White Queen, Magic, and Nick Fury. Essentially, what you really want to happen is turn 1, you can play Quinjet. Turn 2, you can play the Collector. Turn 3, you can play Psylocke and then something else like Agent 13, Mantis. And then on turn 4, because you played Psylocke, you can play Nick Fury nice and early. And then on turn 5, you'll want to play Magic to extend the game. And then since Nick Fury gave you 2 6-cost cards, you'll have 2 turns to play 6-cost cards, which is very, very powerful. And if you still have your Quinjet up, plus if you have Quinjet plus Mystique, those cards can be even lower cost. There's even a situation where you can have, I've had situations where I get up to 8 power, and I have those 8 power through Psylocke, through playing that character, and then you'll have the ability to play 2 6-cost cards in one turn. So that some funky stuff can happen here. It can be pretty fun when you get combinations like that. But worst case scenario, like even if you don't have Mystique down, that's okay. The Quinjet alone will help you get a lot of cards out, and then the collector will just get a ton of power accumulated by all of these cards. Moon Girl alone just gives collector like sometimes upwards of 4 to 5 damage, which is pretty huge. So this deck is really, really fun. And I think the thing with it too is, there is good synergies built into the deck, but you also really do want to embrace what the Quinjet is giving you there in terms of like Agent 13, the card you're going to draw there, the Cable card, the White Queen card, and the Nick Fury. Obviously, all those cards are going to add things that you're not calculating into your win condition. But you really want to play with those, right? Because the Quinjet's going to make them cheaper. And I don't think this deck, just based on how much power is in it, is ever going to really win alone. You really have to embrace those outside cards into your strategy. And for me, that makes it really fun because every game truly does feel different. I always feel like I'm playing on my toes. But it still also is quite consistent, even though those cards you're going to get are going to be different from game to game. So really, really fun deck. And I think with that, those are pretty much all the decks I wanted to shout out. I think my favorite is the Portals deck, maybe the Polarity one. The Problem is my go-to. Once again, that one just deals tons of damage and KOs the enemy's cards. Like that's very fun to do. And then obviously the Patrician with the Patriot. That's just a really fun combination as well because that's really the only deck that utilizes a ton of cards like Shocker, Misty Knight, the Thing. These cards aren't really viable. They don't really make sense why you'd ever play them without specifically that card. So I like that it kind of brings out what is otherwise unviable cards and makes them really strong. But once again, probably the strongest deck here in just terms of like win-loss ratio is just the Death Dealer card. It's not terribly unique, but it's just consistent. It works. It's got good counterplay. Even if your cards are getting destroyed, that works to your benefit. So it's just a lot of fun as well. And I think with that, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about here for Marvel Snap. I've loved this game. I really wish there was more progression to it. And even if you get the Battle Pass, like it doesn't give you a ton more progression. And I think that's too bad because I've really loved creating decks and stuff like that. And it seems like just the more you play this game, the more sluggish it becomes in a way. So that's too bad. But I'm curious to see what kind of mechanics they add down the road in terms of new cards and just other modes. Once again, I really want that arena mode. I mean, I think the designers of this game came from Hearthstone, right? So you'd think that an arena mode could be in the cards for them as well. Pun intended on that. But thank you to S-Bubs and Fanboy Clay who sent me a couple of their decks. Thank you to everyone who listened. And then once again, like I said, Sidequest will be back at some point this week, maybe a Thursday, maybe a Friday slot for some more. We got a ton of news. We're going to be talking about the Deadpool DLC for Midnight Suns. We're going to talk about the Wolverine leak/rumors. Some of the stuff that's coming out. So a lot more Marvel content is coming just around the horizon. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.